ba 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 ba.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our latest installment of Wealth Wednesdays. I am Erin Creighton. I am the Adult Services Department Head and Assistant Branch Manager for the Fredericksburg branch of the Central Rappahannock Regional Library. As always, for our Wealth Wednesdays, I am thrilled to be joined today by Lamont Brown. Lamont is the owner and wealth manager for Alna Wealth Management. And he is here today to talk to us about retirement income and creating tax efficient retirement income, which is just, I think for everybody is always looking forward to retirement, right, Lamont?
Yeah, I am.
Me too. All right, take it away, Lamont. Thank you.
A recent CNBC article stated that 50% of Americans were concerned about one thing, and that's running out of money. Next slide. Good afternoon, everything. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lamont Brown. I am the owner and certified financial planner with Alna Wealth Management, where we help you build wealth, reduce your taxes, and secure your financial future with confidence. Today, we're going to be talking about something that is where the rubber meets the road. I am an avid golfer, and my dad, when I was growing up as a golfer, he was a putting phenom. He loved putting. And he used to tell me, you drive for show, which is everyone can see your drive, but you putt for dough. And today we're going to be putting for dough. We're going to be talking about retirement income, which is the most important topic. So the first part of this is I'm going to outline why retirement income is so important to you and why you should really, really dig in on this topic. Then we're going to go into the 3 phases of retirement and what you should be thinking about, because, it's always good to know what should I be looking at, right, at this point in my life. Then we're going to talk about the 4 components of retirement income, like what is it made up of, and then how do you, and then start to think about how do we optimize each one of those things. I'm going to give you some pitfalls, some things to look out for. I know, and as you know, there's always these gotchas out there, and I'm going to talk about those, and then I'm going to give you an action plan, and I'm going to show an example of what you should be looking to consider as you build your retirement income plan. I am really, really thoroughly engrossed in retirement planning and retirement income because this is where the rubber meets the road, and it's not often talked about, not in the amount of detail it needs to be. So take your time, build your plan, and we're going to get started today. All right. So why is retirement income so important? So there's 4 areas of consideration as you're building wealth and preparing for retirement. First on that list is retirement income. From there, you want to reduce your taxes, which is driven by your retirement income and the choices you make. So that's that. And then you want to be thinking about, how do I manage risk going forward? So which investments do I have, which is driven by your retirement income strategy. So if you need a lot more income, probably gonna have to invest a little bit differently than if you didn't need as much retirement income. So that, and then finally, preserving your wealth and passing it on to that next generation. All of that's driven by retirement income. If you spend all your money while you're alive, then you're not leaving much. Or if you set it up so you can leave a lot, then that's going to drive your retirement income. So retirement income is important. It is the key to all these other areas. And I hate to say it, that's why most of us are working to retire. At some point, we want to turn the lights off at the last time and move on, right? We want to do those fun things, the grandchildren, the travel, all those things we are avoiding right now. We want to get back to that, right? We want to get to that calm sense of being and not having to stress out and read emails all day long. So retirement income is where it starts, ends, and begins. So we want to start to think about retirement income from start. Next, so after we think about retirement, we want to really figure out, what are the phases of retirement? What should I be doing during these phases? And I like to break it down into early, mid, and late. I don't know why, I just like it that way. But anyway, early, mid, and late. The first part of this is early. That's from 55 to 65 years old. This is the point where you're going to be looking out to build your retirement income plan and start to look at possible options on when you want to leave your job. But there's one thing you want to look at. It's called the sequence of returns risk. This is a risk that most people kind of don't really know about or don't really consider as they retire. But when you retire, one of the things you run the risk of is if you're taking withdrawals from the market and you're turning your hard-earned savings into income and all those great things, and say you retire in the not so good year, right? The market's down and it continues to go down for the next year or two. That is the most impactful thing that can happen to your retirement, other than medical expenses and other things like that. And that's also something we're looking at in early retirement, is how do we deal with that? But I digress. The first part of this is you really want to get an understanding of how am I going to protect myself if I retire and the markets go down. So during early retirement, you want to be putting in place those funds and those features into your plan so that if the markets go down, A, you don't have to take from the market, you can wait. B, you're prepared for that with extra savings, or you can delay retirement. So in this first phase, you really want to be thinking about that one, because if it happens and you're retiring at age 65 or age 62, your retirement funds have to last a lot longer. So it's more impactful if you're looking to have a long retirement than it is if you're looking to have a short retirement. For people that are going to wait until 78 and the cows come home, it's a different conversation, and we'll talk a little bit about that later on. But the key thing you want to be looking at here is how do you deal with the sequence of returns risk, which is the risk that the markets go down when you retire and now you're taking out more and you're kind of taking the wind out of your sails. Number two, mid-retirement, this is when you're getting ready to start to take income and you're considering, okay, how do I optimize what I'm going to be doing? So how do I make sure I get the most out of Social Security is number one question, and we'll talk more about that. How do I get the most out of my pensions? How do I get the most out of any annuities that I might be getting income from? And how do I get the most out of anything that's going to generate income during my retirement? Also, I didn't discuss it earlier. In early retirement, you want to be thinking about preparing for those medical risks, like your long-term cares and all that stuff. That's a good opportunity to be thinking about those, because it's early enough where you can make a difference. And you can, and the cost hasn't gone up a lot, right? So you want to be thinking about long-term care and those expenses in that phase. Back to mid-retirement. So you're looking at optimizing income, making sure you understand where all your income is going to come from, how you're going to increase that income, and then how is that income going to continue? Is it going to continue for the rest of your life? Is it going to continue for a short period of time? And those are the decisions you're making during this mid-retirement phase. And late retirement, I'm not saying wait until 75 plus to do your estate plan. Your estate plan should be done early and often, and you should start it today and not tomorrow. And you should make sure you have an estate plan. That is, but this is a phase where you now know what may be left over. So you want to reevaluate what's happened, what is going to happen, and what could happen, and start to think about what is the legacy I want to leave. So if I know that I'm spending about $60,000 a year out of my retirement account and I've got $1.2 million, well, I can pretty much say I might have some money left over. And this is an example not to be used. Don't try that at home, but you really want to be thinking about is it possible that I'll be able to set money aside? Is it possible that I can do some charitable giving and things like that to fulfill those legacy desires? But this is where you want to be looking at this point. So now we've gone through the phases. Let's talk about income. Next slide, please. Your retirement income is really a combination of a lot of different things. This is different than most people are used to dealing with. Most of us are used to getting a salary and that being it, right? So we're not depending on anything else. The salary comes in, it covers everything. But this is different because you're going to have income come from several different sources, hopefully, if you diversify your income, and you're going to want to optimize each one of those. First things first, guaranteed income. This is where you start your conversation. How much am I going to be guaranteed to receive when I retire? And I don't use this word lightly, guaranteed. Guaranteed can come from sources that are from the federal government, and we'll talk specifically about that a little bit later on. They can come from insurance companies or pension companies. All of those companies generate what we call guaranteed income or guaranteed payouts. And there's some nuances to this guaranteed income, which we'll get into a little bit later on. But that's where your base of knowledge should come, your base of focus should be on is how much am I going to be guaranteed to receive from day one all the way until the end of my retirement or until a set period of time, because that's going to drive the rest of this train, right? Because if the guaranteed income is small, then that means you're going to have to increase your savings, you're going to have to increase your income, investment income, you're going to have to put in a lot of other things. If the guaranteed income is large, maybe you don't have to put away as much, but that's a whole different conversation. So number one is guaranteed income. Then you want to look at what am I going to receive from my investments? This is CDs. This is this is these are things like bonds, real estate income. All of those things can be factored into your investment income to determine, well, if I know that I'm going to receive about 2 to 3% from this CD every year and I'm going to keep rolling this thing, okay, well, I can count on that, right? Or I think I can. Or if I know I have a portfolio of bonds or things like that, and I know I'm going to receive that income, I can count on those things. So you want to start to put that into your equation. Then we're going to talk about withdrawals. The difference between investment income and withdrawals is this. One, you're taking out the money that is generating the income. The investment income, you're taking out the income that is generating. So one, you're actually reducing your total savings by using those. And this is probably, I'm going to tell y'all this secret. This is probably the hardest thing for most of us to do, is to prepare for retirement for all these years, put away all this money, and then one day change the direction of the flow. So it was going this way first, now it's going that way. It is very difficult, and it's something that you have to prepare yourself for, is to start figuring out, how am I going to use these funds? For a lot of people who have been savers for 30, 40 years, it is a hard thing for them to do. So you have to start thinking about, how am I going to turn this into income? And that's why I've been saving. That's why I haven't gone on those vacations. That's why I've delayed buying a new car. All those things. You want to put that in the perspective and start considering, when are you going to turn it into withdrawals and how are you going to turn it into withdrawals? And then finally, this is a catch-all for all of the risks that we want to consider as we're building this retirement income plan, and that is inflation, risk, that's that sequence of return risk, and longevity, living until the cows come home. That's a long time, by the way. I just wanted to say. But inflation, risk, and longevity, those are things you want to add into the plan. And we'll talk specifically about how you add those into the plan. All right. So now we've covered all the pillars of retirement income. There's the guarantee, the investment income, withdrawals, inflation, risk, and longevity. Now let's dig deeper into guaranteed income. This one is, I like this one. I don't know why. I just like guaranteed. I don't get to say it very often in my profession, but I do like saying guaranteed because it feels good. It makes like a blanket around me. I feel really good about being able to say guaranteed. But anyway, there are common sources of guaranteed income. Number one, we all know what that is, right? Social Security. It's a guaranteed income source. Number two is our pensions from your employer, from OPM, things like that. And then number three is annuities. Pensions and annuities are generally guaranteed by insurance companies or companies. It depends on your situation. Social Security is guaranteed by the federal government. All of these are guaranteed income sources, and you want to stack those up as high as you possibly can, and you want to know what you can depend on. Key planning considerations for these things are: does it come with a cost of living adjustment? That is like magic. If it comes with a cost of living adjustment, at least you know that you're not gonna out inflation is potentially not gonna outrun you, because those cost of living adjustments can be changed, but you want to know if it does, right? And most federal, like Social Security has cost of living adjustment on it whenever they do it, right? Some pensions will have cost of living adjustments if they're paid by federal employers. They generally will have cost of living adjustments on. Annuities, on the other hand, generally don't. So you want to know, is this thing going to increase over time, so that when milk goes up, that I don't go down, right? I can continue to buy milk. So you want to know those things as you're considering your guaranteed income sources. Key planning considerations for guaranteed income is: number one, when do I start? Because all of these are controlled by when you start. If you start Social Security at 62, it is really different than if you start at 67, and it is even more different than if you start at age 70. So you want to know, when am I going to start this? Because that's going to determine a lot of things. If you stop working at 62 and you don't start Social Security at 67, you've got a gap of time. You have to figure out, how am I going to make ends meet, or how am I going to replace that income that I'm deferring till later? So number two is, how am I going to start it? Am I going to start it as a single payment to myself, or am I going to start it as a joint payment? With Social Security, it's always going to be single. You're always going to be paying it straight. You're going to get what you've earned. With other things like pensions and annuities, you have the option of tying it to one life or two, um, given a guaranteed set period of time. You have a lot of different options that you want to be considering when you're trying to maximize and optimize that income for your family situation. If you tie it to two lives, you're going to get less of a payment. So now that may have an impact on how much you need to withdraw and how much investment income you'll need. So that's why this guaranteed income is the first question you need to figure out and answer: is, how much will I receive? And because it creates this floor where you won't go below this particular amount of income. Now, the final part is inflation. How am I going to keep up with inflation with this guaranteed income? If it's Social Security, you will get cost of living adjustments. Not all pensions will have cost of living adjustments, and most annuities will not have cost of living adjustments. So you want to know, how am I going to keep pace with inflation if I start this income today? So first part of an income plan is your guaranteed income. Determine how much you're going to receive. Next part is understanding the planning and all that. And now we're going to go into investment income. So this is the income that's being thrown off or provided to you, or given to you from your investments. This can come from dividends. This can come from bonds. And bonds, as you know, they are as diverse as the day comes. They're issued by the Treasury. They're issued by municipalities. They're issued by companies. They're issued by everyone, and all of them have different characteristics. And then you have real estate. That's real estate income. Like if you're renting out properties and you're getting income from that, that's one real estate. Then there's things like real estate investment trusts, which can generate income also. So you want to know, how much will you have to depend on? Back in the old days, I used to run into it quite frequently, where I'd run into an old dividend stock portfolio. I even had a drip portfolio. So I don't see it as often as I did before, but that doesn't mean it's not good. But I used to see this quite often where people have built up dividend portfolios, and that was how they were generating their income. So this is an important consideration. It takes time to do this. And if you're anticipating you're going to need X amount of dividends or X amount of investment income, you've got to start doing that today. That's the only point I'm trying to make, is these things have to be put in place, and they need to be put in place well in advance of retirement day one. So bonds and real estate, because you're not taking out the amount, you're not taking out a piece of the principal. You're only taking out the interest that it's throwing off. You have to have a lot more invested to make this work. So you want to consider that. Now, next, we're going to go into tax efficient withdrawal. So there's always for most people, this is how they're making ends meet. They have their guaranteed income, and then they have these withdrawals. You want to do this in the most tax efficient way. One thing you have to be considerate of is not all income is created equal. Income coming from pre-tax vehicles like 401ks, IRAs, those types of things is taxed differently than income coming from selling a stock that is held in an after-tax investment account, or taking money out of an annuity. All of those things have things that you need to be unaware of as you start to take this money out. And you want to know, what is going to be the tax impact if I take all my distributions from my 401k or my IRA? If I take it all from there, you're going to be charged ordinary income tax. So, or if I take all of my income from an after-tax investment account. So you want to know those things. And then you want to know the withdrawal hierarchy. Generally speaking, and this is not to be used as a directive, you want to reduce your taxes as much as possible when you're taking those distributions. There's different ways to do that. One way is to focus on your pre-tax money later in your withdrawals, and focus on your after-tax company after-tax stocks and things like that early on in your withdrawal, when you're taking withdrawals. And all of that is something that needs to be considered. If you have a large amount of income that you can take from your after-tax brokerage accounts and things like that, then that may be an option for you. But you want to know, how am I going to take these things out to minimize my tax impact? I actually have a story on that one. I had an individual came in, he wanted to take out every dollar out of his 401k to pay off bills. Well, the problem with that is there's a tax bill that came with that hadn't been considered. So you want to know, what is going to be the tax impact of what I'm doing? And is it going to cause any problems? The next one is one of those problems. That is Social Security tax torpedo. This is a little known thing, but there's a point where your Social Security tax rate goes up, and it can cause you to pay a higher marginal tax rate, your marginal tax rate to go up in just a small sliver of time, just if your income falls within this range. And that's something you want to know, and know whether or not you're putting yourself into that situation. It's something you can plan around by taking Social Security later, or taking less distributions. There's a lot of different ways around this, but this is something that you have to know. Social Security is taxed at 0, 50, and 85%. And there's ranges in there where you can increase your marginal tax rate if you come into one of those bumps. So you want to know what that is, and you want to plan around that so that you're the most tax efficient you can be, right? And then you want to consider things like Roth conversions. If you know that longevity runs in your family, doing Roth conversions may make sense, right? Because you're doing Roth conversions early on in your retirement, and you're reducing. And then when you start having to withdraw those funds, they're going to come out what? tax-free, right? Especially if you met the 5-year holding requirement of having that IRA, and doing all those things. You're over 59 and a half, and you did all the things you needed to do to make that qualified withdrawal. So it could come out completely tax-free later on. And then there's things like tax loss harvesting, where you're reducing your you're selling off your losers, getting them out of there, and you're also reducing your ordinary income because you've sold enough losers to make that happen. So all of that is part of this whole retirement income. I know it's a lot, and that's why I said this is where the rubber meets the road, because there's a lot of things that happen all around that 60 to 65 range. You got Social Security, Medicare, you got all Roth, you got all these things that happen in that space of time, retirement, all those things. And you have to be kind of juggling all of those to make sure that it fits for you. Next slide, please. Now, this is the area where you want to put a blanket around and put that umbrella over to keep the rain off of your head. Inflation, inflation, inflation. That is the risk that you start and you're receiving $1,000 a month for your first year. That's great. But cost of goods is going up over time, and you're still receiving $1,000. So now you might have started out being able to buy a whole loaf of bread at the beginning of retirement, but by 10 years in, you can only buy one slice of bread. That's a problem. So you want to be preparing for, how am I going to increase the amount of income that I'm receiving so that I keep pace and can keep my lifestyle kind of where it is. This is important. And the way you do that is by knowing your guaranteed income sources and considering that cost of living adjustment that they are going to be making. You want to make sure that you understand that. And next is investment income. That is a great tool to prevent and protect you against inflation, because those things hopefully are growing as the market is growing and everything else is increasing. So you want to have places inside your retirement income plan where you can see and actually see how you're going to increase at the rate of inflation or greater. Next, you want to put into place risk reduction methods. The greatest risk reduction method out there is cash, right? If it's not in the market, it can't go down, right? So what you want to be looking at is, as I am preparing for retirement, I think you should have anywhere from a year to 2 years of money that's not at risk. I'm not saying in cash only, but you should have money that, if, in case of emergency, you could break glass and know that you're going to be okay. And that is one of those tools you want to be putting in place as you near retirement. So putting that cash aside, or putting that money aside, so that when the markets go down and you need to pull money out, you're not worried about losing your position or eating through your overall retirement savings before you even got started. So going into retirement, this is going to be one of those keys. Longevity planning. I am fortunate that both of my grandmothers lived to be the ripe age of 93. But that also adds to my planning angst, because 93 is a long time away from where I am right now. And that's a very long retirement. So you want to be thinking about that. If you have longevity in your plan, in your family, you want to be thinking about it. I probably need to save a little bit more, because I might live to be 93, or I'm going to be living on my son's couch. One of my sons would love it. The other one probably wouldn't love it as much, but he'd get through it. But either way, you want to be thinking about living a long, happy life. You don't want to plan for, I don't think I'm going to live past X. You want to be thinking about long, happy life, because that is the most stressful stress you can put on a plan. And it also forces you to think about, well, what's going to happen with my medical? What's going to happen with longevity? All those things. So inflation, risk, and longevity are the fourth part of your retirement income plan. Next slide. Here are some pitfalls. I put these on the slide because I've seen all of them. Oh my gosh, I wish I hadn't, but I do. And increasing living expenses. I don't know how many times I've seen a downsize that turned into an upsize plus some, right? So you need to be aware that your living expenses are important, and they will drive how much of your money you have to use in retirement. If you can and your expenses are low enough, try to keep your expenses below your guaranteed income sources. That at least assumes that you're going to have enough to cover all of your expenses well into the future, and just use the rest of your money for grandchildren, travel, and all those fun things. So you want to attach guaranteed income to those known expenses. If you can build enough guaranteed income that your known expenses are covered, then you're in a good place. But don't go off increasing your living expenses just as you start retirement. This is not a good thing. I've seen it from, upsizing, we're going to reduce our house size, but then you just double the size of the house. I've seen all of it. Be aware of this and just know that this is not the point. When you're focused on retirement, you need to make sure that you know where that income is going to come from, and that you're not overextending your bounds with that. This happens while you're working, but it's a whole different situation when you know you're going to work for another 5 years. You'll make it out, right? But when you're in retirement, once you take it out of that retirement account and spend it, there's very little going to come back in. So you want to know that. Not considering taxes. I don't know how many times I've heard this one. Oh, my retirement won't be taxed when it comes out. It will. So especially your pre-tax retirement. Now, Roth and all those other things, no. But with your pre-tax retirement, you need to know what the taxes are going to be. You need to know that tax is going to be on the ordinary income tax side. There's not going to be capital gains tax. So it's going to be just like you earn those funds. So you want to know that going into it so you can plan around that. Underestimating healthcare. I see this one quite often. Medicare expenses, most people understand that, but what they don't plan for is the unknowns. That's an extended medical stay, that's a long-term care, that's all of those things above, right? You want to know and have some buffer in your plan to cover those healthcare expenses. And then finally, not adjusting conditions. You're that frog that's in that pot of water and the water's turning up, and you're not saying, oh, maybe it is getting a little bit warm. You want to always be looking at your plan on an annual, every 6 months to annually. You want to be looking at it and making adjustments. If the market's gone down, make an adjustment. If the market's gone up, make an adjustment. If your expenses have changed, make an adjustment. Don't start and try to finish with the exact same amount coming out each month, because the conditions are changing and you need to be aware and making those adjustments. So those are the common pitfalls. And this poor guy right here, he's not liking what's going on in his life right now. So you don't want to be like him. You want to know what's coming up. And for what you can have control over, you want to have control over it. Next slide, please. Here's your action plan. First and foremost, lay it all out. Put your income, your expenses, your liabilities, put it all on paper. Know what it's going to look like when you retire. And then you want to build what we call a cash flow chart. And the first 10 years of retirement are critical. And so I often recommend building a 10-year cash flow to plan how much money am I going to need. And 10 years is not, it's just 10 years is a lot easier to kind of digest, but you want to look out as far as you humanly can, if possible, to understand what you can expect and and if there's any gaps in your plan. And then you want to start to look for tax inefficiencies. I'm withdrawing from a pre-tax account. What happens if I change this to Roth? What happens if I do that? You want to start asking those tough questions. Then you want to decide on what your withdrawal strategy is going to be. Am I going to do Roth conversions early so that I have Roth later on? And how am I going to do this? I'm going to take money out of my pre-tax bucket first and then delay the other till later. All of that is factored in. And then you want to put it through a stress. You want to tell him, hey, what are you doing? Are you going to work? And you want to ask those hard questions, though, is to stress him out, stress your plan out to see if it actually works. I just had this vision of being in boot camp and the drill instructor yelling at me and I'm being completely stressed out. That's what you want to do to your retirement plan. You want to stress it out to see if he or she can handle the pressure. and I still got Colonel Nathan Jessup going through my head. You can't handle the truth. But anyway, whole different conversation. Back to this. Don't be afraid to adjust your plan. Don't be afraid to adjust your plan. Because it worked yesterday doesn't mean it's going to work tomorrow. And you need to make adjustments. Don't be afraid to adjust your plan. This is probably one of the harder things. Oh, I'm used to receiving $5,000 a month. I need to keep. Well, if the markets have changed, $5,000 a month may need to be dropped. You need to make those adjustments. So don't be afraid. Next slide, please. So here's a 5. This is what a 10-year cash flow would look like. I'm only showing you 5. Just imagine it, etc. I know I'm that way. But just imagine the etc. going on. This is a hypothetical example of a case, right? And this family, they retire in that first year, and you could see where the income stops, and they're starting to take. They're starting to receive Social Security in full in that second year, and down at the bottom you see net cash flow. That is how much they're going to have to find in the system somewhere to make ends meet. That is where your withdrawals would come from. But you want to outline what is it you're going to receive, Social Security, income, all those things. You want to put in your living expenses. This is pre-tax, right? You want to factor in taxes. You want to factor in all the savings you've been doing. And then you want to see, well, what's left over? Well, it's a big negative number. It's $141,000. They have to figure out where that's going to come from. And that's where those withdrawals from your accounts come from. They don't have any investment income coming in, so they got to figure out where this is all going to come from. So hope this was helpful. Next slide. I'll leave you with this quote. This is one of mine. So get the income right. It can help you sleep at night. I like it because it kind of rhymes, but you want to know where your income is going to come from. You want to know that you have it set up and you're ready to go. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, or you can ask the question right here today.
So I'm just going to throw the disclaimer up there as always, as the last one.
Yep.
But thank you, Lamont, so much for that really interesting presentation. Honestly, when you were talking about the first of all, the drill sergeant thing was really funny. For those of you that this is your first episode, Lamont is a veteran, and so he has that like real life experience. But I think the fact that you were talking about having a year or two of expenses to sort of, cushion in case anything happens seems like a really smart idea, just because you never know, like if, you could get into a car accident or something could happen you need like a major change needs to happen at home or whatnot. So that seemed like, to have like a little bbit of fluidity seemed like a really smart idea.
It is. So while you're working, most financial planners will recommend 6 to 9 months of expenses held up. But when you're in retirement, there's nothing else coming in, and you want to be prepared for that nothing else coming in by knowing that you have at least 1 to 2 years. And that allows you the peace of mind knowing that the markets can do whatever they're going to do and you still have it covered.
That's smart, especially because it seems like the markets are a little wacky at the moment. So not making a political statement, just saying that it seems a little wacky. So I think, having a little bit more fluidity is a good plan. I think planning is the plan. Planning to have a plan is a good plan.
It's always good to have a plan for the plan too.
A plan for the plan. And if you need help with that plan, please contact Lamont. I threw up your contact information again, and your website is in the comments. Thank you so much for sharing your wealth of information with our community.
I enjoy it every time, and I'm looking forward to next month. So I can't remember what the topic is, but I'm sure we'll be
off the top of my head. You had to ask. Well, we do these every month, and they are fantastic. And I'm buying time as I go to our wonderful website at the library to type in to see what the next title is going to be. And it says "Protecting Your Wealth and Your Family's Future" is the next title.
Okay. Yep.
So I saw it long enough to get there.
Good job.
All right. We'll see you all next month, everyone. Thank you so much.
Take care. Enjoy.